The scent of grilled ribs and freshly cut grass should have filled the air with comfort and warmth. But instead, I stood there in my pressed sundress, holding a lemonade like it was my only armor, feeling completely invisible. It was my parents' 45th wedding anniversary, a grand backyard BBQ celebration with relatives, old Navy friends, and neighbors still calling my dad Colonel, even though he'd been retired for over a decade. He thrived in this environment, retelling war stories for the umpteenth time, and people gathered around him like disciples at a campfire. My mom flitted from table to table, refilling drinks, whispering names of guests she had long since forgotten. Me? I was the daughter with the boring computer job, the one who always missed birthdays and family events because of some project. I watched as my cousin Brett proudly displayed his commendation medal from a recent training exercise. My uncle slapped him on the back so hard, I could hear it from across the yard. "Now that's a soldier," my uncle boomed. "Boots on the ground, that's real service." Everyone buzzed around them, eager to ask questions. No one ever asked about what I did. And honestly, I had stopped expecting them to. They had already built an easy version of me. Emily works with computers. It explained everything and nothing. Like I was someone who just fixed Wi-Fi routers at a help desk. I let it slide every time. Because in my world, silence isn't just a preference, it's survival. I'm Emily Carter. To my family, I'm a 38-year-old spinster who never quite measured up. But to the Department of Defense, I'm Brigadier General Carter, commander of Joint Task Force Ares, overseeing the nation's offensive cyber operations. I earned my star 3 weeks ago, promoted in a private classified ceremony. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? To them, rank was all about shouting orders and getting dirty. To them, if you didn't have mud on your boots, you weren't really serving. I stood near the folding table by the drinks, pretending to listen to my aunt drone on about Florida real estate. But my eyes kept drifting back to my dad, laughing with his old squad mates, getting louder and prouder with every beer. I used to crave his approval. But now I wasn't sure I even wanted to be seen. My brother was grilling burgers, tossing them with flair like he was auditioning for a cooking show. My nephews were running around with water guns, creaming with that kind of unbridled joy that only sugar and summer can create. And through it all, I kept smiling, not the smile that reaches your eyes, but the one that makes you invisible. The camouflage of the competent woman. At some point, a neighbor asked if I had moved back to town. "No, I still live in DC," I replied. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then, tilting her head, she asked, "Still doing that thing with spreadsheets?" I laughed politely. Something like that. It was easier than explaining that just last week my spreadsheets had involved rerouting the guidance systems of a hostile drone swarm over the Pacific. In that crowd, I wasn't General Carter. I was just Emily, the girl who never brought a boyfriend home, the one who didn't understand real service. To them, a uniform meant front lines, and valor meant volume, not silence behind a classified firewall. I glanced up as my dad raised his glass, already preparing for one of his famous toasts. I knew how it would go. A tribute to my mom, a joke or two about army life, and inevitably, a subtle jab at his quiet daughter with her quiet job. I braced myself not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. As everyone gathered around him, eyes shining with admiration and nostalgia, I stayed behind the crowd. Part of me wanted to disappear, but another part, one I buried deep, was calculating. Not out of spite, but out of instinct. Because in my real world, being unseen is often the greatest strength you can have. But being underestimated, that's the ultimate advantage. When my dad lifted his glass, the whole yard fell silent, just like it always did. He had a presence that commanded attention. A colonel's presence. He began with a toast to my mom, calling her the anchor of his life. She blushed and waved him off. Then he launched into his favorite topic, the service. The stories flowed smoothly, polished from decades of retelling. The time his battalion crossed a desert storm. The night he made a call that saved his platoon. His friends nodded with pride, adding little details from their own memories. I watched as he grew taller in their admiration, a version of him I rarely saw at home but knew by heart. Every so often, someone would glance my way, as if wondering whether I felt proud. I forced a half smile. It was easier than questioning whether I would ever fit in the world he revered. And then, as always, he shifted into his final punchline. A joke at my expense. He grinned. My stomach tightened. I braced myself for the familiar sting. He pointed his glass at me, casual as ever. And here's my daughter, Emily. She's in DC doing something with computers. Spreadsheets, files, whatever that is. The crowd chuckled. Then came the kicker. Not everyone is cut out for the hard stuff, you know? Some people have to keep the chairs warm while the rest of us do the real work. Right? Laughter rippled through the group. It wasn't malicious. It was dismissive. The laughter of those who thought they had a better grasp of real service than I did. My mom stared at the grass. I felt the heat creep up my neck. But I didn't move. I didn't shift my weight. Years of training had taught me how to hold still under pressure. My dad chuckled at his own joke, taking a sip of beer. She knows I'm joking, he said, shrugging. She keeps the family grounded. Someone has to answer the phones, right? I smiled weakly. Someone has to organize the files, Dad, I replied softly. He grinned, satisfied. He had put me back in my box. The quiet box. The safe box. I took a sip of lemonade, checking my watch. 1,600 hours. Most people think of the military as boots on the ground or jets in the sky. My battlefield looks different. It's a cold, windowless room surrounded by rows of terminals and glowing screens that never sleep. I'm part of Joint Task Force Ares. We're the tip of the spear for Cyber Command. My job? Finding patterns in chaos. Detecting threats before they even form. We don't use bullets. We use code, zero-day exploits, information warfare. A few months ago, I identified a cyber probe targeting naval infrastructure in Guam. It looked like noise, but I saw the signature. I flagged it, ran simulations, and discovered a planned electronic attack meant to blind our satellite network. We neutralized it before it spread. The Pacific Fleet stayed online because of it. There were no headlines, no medals. Just a quiet nod from the president and a new threat profile added to the playbook. That's how we win. Quiet, precise, invisible. And that's the part my family never saw. To them, I was the girl who worked with computers. But in my world, they call me General. And right now, they weren't calling me anything at all. They were too busy staring at me like I was a stranger, a terrifying, powerful stranger who had been hiding in plain sight. I stood by the cooler, refilling my ice when it happened. My phone buzzed in my purse. Not a text, not a call. A specific rhythmic pattern I programmed myself. 3 short pulses, 2 long, 3 short, delta pattern. I didn't reach for the phone immediately. I scanned the yard. My dad was still talking, my mom was cutting the cake. The music cut out. The Bluetooth speaker died mid-song. Something was wrong. I looked up again. My secure phone buzzed harder. I reached into my purse, pulled it out. The screen was black except for a single line of red text, Code 0 Skyline compromised. Immediate extraction required. I stared at the screen. Skyline, our eastern seaboard power grid. Someone had attacked it. Hard. The lights flickered in the neighborhood. My brother looked up. The kitchen lights just went out, he said. People murmured, confused. Then the sound came low at first, like a heartbeat. It grew, fast, mechanical. Everyone looked up. Is that a helicopter? My uncle asked. Too low. My dad's instincts kicked in. That sounds military. The roar grew louder. The trees whipped violently in the wind. People screamed. The umbrella tore loose from the table. My dad yelled, "Get away from the windows!" And then the helicopter appeared. A black MH-6 little bird. Small, agile, and bristling with antennas. Soldiers hanging out. Weapons at the ready. It flared hard and set down in the middle of the street. My family froze. My cousin Brett looked like he might pass out. My dad stood there, mouth agape. The lead operator didn't look at anyone else. He walked straight past my dad right to me. He stopped 3 feet away, snapped his heels together. "General Carter," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. I returned the salute, calm, precise, muscle memory kicking in. "Report, Major." "Skyline is down, ma'am. The grid is offline from Boston to D.C. The chairman has activated continuity of government protocols." He handed me a secure tablet. "We have the nuclear football on standby. We need your biometric key to unlock the Counter-Strike package." I nodded, scanning my thumb. The screen went green. "Is the bird secure?" I asked. "Yes, General." "Direct line to the White House. Wheels up in 60 seconds. I turned to my father. He was pale, his beer glass tight in his hand. "You might want to put that down, Colonel," I said coldly. "You're addressing a superior officer." He dropped the beer. It didn't break. It just thudded in the grass. He stood at attention. Slowly, shakily, he raised his hand. A retired colonel saluting his daughter. "At ease, Colonel," I said. I turned to the major. "Let's go." "Yes, General." The operators formed a protective diamond around me as we walked to the helicopter. I climbed onto the skid. The pilot handed me a headset. I put it on, tuning out the world. I looked back one last time. My family was staring at me, silent, shocked. "Asset secured," I said. "Get us to the Pentagon. We have a war to fight." As the helicopter lifted off, I left the backyard, left the judgment behind. The world was safe. And for the first time I didn't mind the silence. Because now, they knew exactly who was saving it. If you enjoyed this thrilling story and want to hear more about explosive moments like this, make sure to subscribe to HOA Incident Files. Stay tuned for more powerful, heart-pounding stories that you won't want to miss. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified every time we release a new video.